Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about graphic design principles and how you can use them to improve the way you make your cards. So today we're going to focus on patterns and how to combine them to make a cohesive but still contrasted design for your card. So in graphic design and in art, the aim of any good design or piece is to have contrast. And your contrast needs to be balanced. And what I mean by that is that there needs to be balance in the colour, in the patterns, and in the contrasts. And we're going to focus on how to match the patterns together first. So the magic formula is you have a large to medium scale pattern, and then you have a small scale pattern and a solid colour. So in this example I've picked these three, and you can see that this is quite a busy pattern. So this is my main pattern, and then I decided to pull the red tone from the cherries that I've coloured in, and I picked a stripy paper, which is a small scale pattern because the items are quite close together, so the stripes are quite close together, and that's in contrast to the cherries being spread out. There's a lot of white space in this pattern, so it doesn't feel as busy as it would be if it had, say, a darker red background or a maybe another green or something. And then for my solid I decided to pick this glitter paper, and I like that because it added some texture and just something different, and it's kind of juxtaposed to the smoothness of the main paper. And then this glittery paper also has some texture because the glitter stripes are raised, which is a really nice touchy-feely contrast, and it makes a good balance. Okay, so that's just one example. I also have the same sheet that I actually coloured in a slightly different green. It has more blue in it, and a slightly less orange red. I don't know how else to explain that. And I just wanted to show you again that you can use metallics as a solid just to add some interest to your solid, and this has a linen texture, but when your eye looks at it, at first glance it just sees a solid pattern. So you could pair that up with another pattern, say maybe the stripes, or you could pick something where the red matches a little bit better, but just to get an idea you can choose different kind of solids with different textures. Okay, let me show you another one. So I picked this pattern and this pattern, and then I didn't have a perfect blue colour to match, but I thought this one read like a solid because it's got some slight sort of distressing on it, but you could colour tint this with your inks to make it the perfect blue, but you could totally use that as the solid in the combination. So you have your large scale pattern here, a smaller one here, and then your what reads solid there, so that works together, and that's quite nice for a masculine card. The other idea I had was to use your paper pads. They often come pre-designed in a colourway, which is really helpful. So I picked this pattern paper, which has a red background and pink text, and then because it's an orangey red, I tied that with this orangey red stripe and a solid. You don't have to go with stripes, I just find stripes and polka dots really versatile for my small scale pattern, just because they're not too busy, and it's the same thing repeated over and over again, whereas this one is quite random. So the contrast between the randomness of this and the uniformity of this is really nice to my eye. And then I picked the pink solid to bring out the pink in the text. And another example I had from that same paper pack was this pale blue with the red, and I could easily just substitute this one for this because it has the pink in the middle of the flower and it has this red as the main part of the flower, and it works really well. You could also use the polka dot that it shows you on the branding strip, and the branding strips are really good keys as to what might go because they often match them up. So that's kind of an intro into how you could pick your patterns. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about what could consist as a solid. So I picked these ones for various different reasons. This is a watercolour wash paper, and it does change colour, but if you had both of these colours in your main paper, this could read as a solid. I also picked this one because while it's a solid red colour, there is some subtle pattern. It's thin embossed. I don't know if you can tell on the camera. It's got like a basket weave effect, and it's got this shimmer to it, which is really pretty. And I thought that would make a really interesting solid for your card. Maybe for like a Christmas card or something, or I think I used that for Valentine's. I also have this pinstripe, and because of the paleness of the paper, I actually found that it reads as a solid colour, or it can do if you haven't got too busy a patterns to go with it. So that can be handy. Another one that could be a solid is this one, because there's only a little element in the corner. So if you were going to do a cluster on this side of the card with a couple of patterns, that could really nicely balance that out. And then another one for a solid would be a pattern paper that's got heat embossing or watermarking on it, where when you look at it straight on, it just reads as a solid colour. It's only when it catches the light that you see the extra detail, and that's quite a sophisticated way of adding in a solid. And you can recreate this with any plain piece of paper, and you can just stamp with your Versamark ink and emboss and get the same effect. Okay, so I've got loads of card examples to show you because I think when you put things into practice, it just helps you solidify what you've learned about something. So the first one I wanted to show you is the first Lady Bee card I made, and the reason why this fits the patterns and the formula is because my solid is the yellow, my small pattern is the polka dots, and my big pattern is the stripes. That's just how it reads on this particular card. Whereas on another card you might have a larger scale pattern where this reads as the second pattern rather than the first pattern, if that makes sense. And you can see I've added doodling in the background of the solid, but I've kept it to the same colours, and I repeated it on the other solid, which was the main image, so that it's harmonious and it's not jarring. So your eyes naturally rest here and here, if that makes sense. And I've kept it in the same colour family with the white, yellow and black. So it's still harmonious, even though I've actually got quite a few different patterns going on, because I've added texture here with the zigzag, I've added the dashed lines, I've also added the scribbly border and this dotty pattern, which is also repeated from here. So it's quite a complex card. I've stuck to the 3 principles, but then I've kind of kicked it up a notch with all of my doodles and extra details. But it's still pretty harmonious. So I kept the rules and kind of broke them at the same time, which is kind only usually what I end up doing. This is another card. It might be easier to take them out actually. This was one that I did for a previous collection on my foiling video, I think. And I used a stencil to create my own background paper. So you can see this design here. I just picked the teal colour from the bird and the solid paper that I picked. It's not the exact same colour tone, but it's close enough that it reads as a cohesive colour scheme. So that's my large scale pattern, that's my small to medium scale, and this is my solid. And then I've just added in some gold gems. You can also see in the background here, very faintly, there's some hearts I stamped. That was just continuing the pattern on. But yeah, so you can also make your own patterns if you don't have the exact one to go with what you're wanting to use. Okay. Now I picked this Lovely Lashes Edna one to show you because I actually had quite a difficult time matching my yellows, and I had a hack that got me around that. So I had originally Distress Ink edged Edna before I had decided what card that I was going to make. So I was kind of stuck with this orange Distress Ink, and I really wanted to use this spotty paper which reads almost as solid, but it's not. The red is my solid in this equation, and I really wanted to use up this scrap of paper because it had these cool little hearts in which I thought were nice, and I don't know, I just felt like it went with Edna really well, but the yellows didn't match. So what I did was I edged everything in the same Distress Ink which brought the colour tone into harmony, and then I also went round with the same grey pen that I used on Edna around the edges of each thing, and that gave it like a faux frame. So remember when I was talking about contrast, we either use a solid to matte our image or we frame it, and in this case I used the ink blending on the edges and the ink around the edge with the Pro Marker to create my frame. And the way I positioned my papers is very grounding to the image, so it naturally brings your eye into the image. So that's how my patterns work, to focus on my focal point and to cheat the colours because they didn't quite match. So that's that one. This one is a really simple one. It's literally 2 patterns and a white background. But I also wanted to say that you can actually bring in more than one solid if you want to hack your 3 paper rule. So in this case I have 3 solids. I have the red from the washi tape, which is grounding. I have this black, and I have the white of the card base. And you can see all of my elements are tied together with red, and there's also red repeated in this pattern paper. And on this one, this would be my large scale, this would be my small scale, and then the white would be my solid, but obviously there are other solids involved. So if you're going to add more than 3 patterns, I would go with ones that read solid just to start with, and then as you gain your confidence you can bring in more patterns, but just don't go too crazy and watch your colours. Here's another one. This is so perfectly balanced in terms of the 3 rules. So you've got your main busy pattern, which is the lemons, your solid black, and then your stripy would be your mid. And I've repeated the mid in the decoration here with the little ribbon, and I've used the black to matte the sentiment again because that is what I did with the main paper. So my 2 focal points have the same grounding element, which is the matte for the backgrounds. It's actually really difficult to say out loud what my brain is thinking because I just do it because I have always done it that way. So if things don't come out well, please tell me down below and I will try and explain it a bit better. Here's another example of where I made my own background large scale pattern, and that was with the heart stencils, and I deliberately made it non-uniform so that my eye wouldn't focus here and it would focus on my main Lady Bee image because she's so pretty. Then I used black as my solid and then this spotty as my mid, and then I cheated a bit and created this separate pattern down the side, but because it is cohesive on this panel, this reads as one panel even though there's actually lots of things going on. And you can see that I've repeated silver and the different colour tones throughout. And my two things that I'm grounding are this panel and my sentiment strip, so I've repeated the same stitching and the same colours so it looks cohesive. So I've kind of kept the rules there and I've kind of cheated at the same time, but it still works. I'm going to get off now, and I just want to say thank you for listening, and if you've got any questions I'd love to hear them, what your thoughts are, any that you did or didn't like, if you think layout is important to matching patterns, basically anything you want to ask me, put it in the comments below. 50 awesome points to everybody who got this far in the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can find out when I release new videos, and there are a couple of videos here for your delectation if you so desire.